If you had asked me just a month ago, I would have told you my family was nothing out of the ordinary. A little passive-aggressive at holidays, some mild favoritism toward my younger sister. The usual family drama. Annoying? Sure. Unbearable? Not really. But then Emily's wedding happened, and I realized something I should have seen a long time ago. I wasn't just less important. I wasn't even considered family anymore. Imagine being seated outside the ballroom, next to a coat rack, while your entire family celebrated inside like you didn't exist. Imagine being told to your face that you're not immediate family because you grew up and dared to live your own life. Yeah, it was that kind of day, and what followed wasn't just a little awkwardness, it was an all-out family meltdown, one that I may or may not have played a very satisfying part in. So sit tight, because today, I'm sharing how a wedding turned into a battlefield, and why I walked away with absolutely no regrets. If you looked at us from the outside, you'd probably think we were a perfectly normal family, a little sarcastic, a little competitive, but normal. Growing up, I was the responsible one, the one expected to get straight A's, say please and thank you, and set a shining example for my little sister Emily. Emily, meanwhile, was the family's golden child. She could do no wrong. If I so much as forgot to take out the trash, it was a federal offense. But if Emily wrecked Mom's car backing out of the driveway, she's just under a lot of stress, Mom would say, patting her on the head like she was a wounded kitten. When I brought home a B+, it wasn't good enough. We expect more from you, Alex. When Emily scraped by with a C, there were balloons, cake, and endless declarations of how proud they were. I learned early on not to expect much recognition. If I did something amazing, it was quietly acknowledged, maybe a nod, maybe a grunt. But if Emily managed to make toast without burning the house down, it was national news. As the years went by, I stopped competing, stopped trying to earn what I knew wasn't coming. I built my own life outside of our little family bubble. College, career, my own apartment. I created distance. Not because I hated them, but because I needed air. Family gatherings became something I endured, not enjoyed. Thanksgiving was especially brutal. Mom would spend the entire meal boasting about Emily's latest achievement. She reorganized her closet. Such initiative. While my own milestones got glossed over like background noise. Dad was just there. Nodding, eating, tuning out any conversation that sounded remotely emotional. It wasn't great, it wasn't terrible, it just was. I told myself that was life. Some people get confetti, some people get politely ignored. I honestly believed I had made peace with it. Sure, it stung sometimes, but I figured every family has their quirks. Some favoritism here, a little uneven love there, nothing personal. But as Emily's wedding approached, I started noticing little things. The way Mom only talked about the family in terms of Emily's future. Emily and her husband this, Emily and her husband that. The way invitations were discussed, always assuming I would attend but never really including me in the plans. And the way Emily herself started treating me, not like her big brother anymore. A number of years. But like a guest at an event she barely remembered inviting. Still, I brushed it off. I told myself I was overthinking it. I told myself everything would be fine. It wasn't. What happened at that wedding didn't just confirm the ugly truth I'd been avoiding. It smashed it into my face with all the subtlety of a brick through a window. My family didn't just have favorites. They had a leading lady. And spoiler alert, it wasn't me. I pulled up to the venue about 15 minutes before the ceremony was supposed to start, thinking I'd timed it perfectly, early enough to avoid being the last one there, late enough to not get roped into any pre-wedding chaos. From the outside, the place looked beautiful. A sprawling estate, draped in fairy lights and white roses, exactly the kind of place my parents would have picked to make Emily feel like the princess she clearly believed she was. I smiled to myself. Whatever, it was her day. I straightened my tie, grabbed the card and gift I'd spent way too much time picking out, and headed inside. The lobby was buzzing with guests. Aunts, uncles, cousins, random co-workers Emily barely knew but still invited to bulk up the head count. Everyone looked polished, smiling, ready for a Hallmark movie kind of day. I made my way over to the check-in table, where two wedding planners were directing people to their assigned tables for the reception later. I gave them my name. Their expressions shifted just slightly, a flicker of confusion, maybe a little awkwardness, but then one of them plastered on a tight smile. "Oh, right this way." I followed, expecting to be led into the grand ballroom where crystal chandeliers hung overhead and dozens of elegantly set tables waited for the celebration to begin. Instead, we walked past the entrance, past the beautifully decorated photo booth, past the main reception room entirely, and straight into the hallway. Near the coat racks, the smell of winter jackets and mothballs hit me immediately. "Here you are," the planner said, gesturing toward a sad little table set up next to a utility closet. One chair, one small centerpiece, a place card with my name written in calligraphy, because apparently, if you're going to exile someone, you should still do it fabulously. I blinked. Is this right?" I asked, half laughing because surely this was a mistake. The planner's smile faltered for a second, then returned even tighter than before. "Yes, right here," and then she practically sprinted back toward the main hall. I stood there, staring at my little corner of exile. I could hear music drifting from the ballroom, laughter, chatter, the clinking of champagne glasses. Inside, family, friends, celebration. Outside, me, the coats, and the faint hum of the heating vent. For a long second, I just stood there. Maybe this was some mistake. Maybe someone would come rushing out, horrified, and say, "Oh my God, no, you're supposed to be at table 6 with the family." But no one came. No one even noticed. And slowly, reality settled in. I wasn't just forgotten. I was deliberately placed out here. Welcome to the family, Alex, where even the coat check gets a better seat than you. For a minute, I just stood there, staring at my assigned table, trying to process what was happening. I kept waiting for someone, anyone, to realize the mistake, but no one did. Guests bustled past me, laughing, adjusting their suits, fixing their dresses, completely oblivious to the fact that one family member had been banished to the coat room. I could have left right then. I could have walked out, gone home, and pretended this never happened. But some stubborn part of me needed answers. I needed to know why. I tucked the place card into my pocket and headed toward the bridal suite. Emily was holding court inside, surrounded by her bridesmaids, our mother, and what looked like a small army of hair and makeup people. She looked stunning, of course. She always did. The perfect dress, the perfect hair, the perfect princess moment. She spotted me approaching and plastered on the kind of smile you give a distant cousin you barely remember. "Oh, hey, you made it." I held up the place card between two fingers. "Yeah? Quick question. Why am I sitting outside the reception hall?" Emily blinked at me like I'd asked her to solve a physics equation. Then she giggled. "Oh, that," she said, waving a hand like it was nothing. "We had to rearrange some things last minute. Seating got kinda tight." I stared at her. "Seating got tight? So you put your own brother next to the Coates?" Our mother, who had been pretending not to listen, chimed in with her usual syrupy tone. "Alex, don't make a scene. It's Emily's special day." I laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. "I'm not making a scene. I'm asking why I'm literally sitting with the winter jackets while the rest of the family is inside popping champagne." Emily shrugged, adjusting her veil like she was bored of the conversation already. "Well, you're not really immediate family anymore." For a second, I genuinely thought I misheard her. "Excuse me?" She smiled sweetly, that fake customer service kind of smile. "I mean, you moved out years ago." You don't come around much. You're not married or anything. It's just different now." I felt something cold settle in my chest. It wasn't just that they didn't prioritize me. It was that they didn't even see me anymore. I wasn't part of the story they were telling about themselves, the perfect family with the perfect daughter having the perfect wedding. I was an extra, a background character, disposable. Before I could even begin to figure out what to say, another voice joined the conversation. "Oh, you're Alex?" someone said with a smirk. I turned to see a tall, perfectly manicured woman in an expensive dress, Emily's new mother-in-law. I'd met her once before, briefly, but today she looked at me like I was a curiosity. "We were wondering whose seat that was," she said, laughing lightly. I smiled back, but it felt wrong on my face. "Yeah, turns out I'm the lucky winner of the coat rack seating lottery." Her smile widened, faux sympathetic. "Well, you know how it is. Only the most important people get the best spot." That was when it clicked. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a last-minute shuffle. This was deliberate. And worse, they were enjoying it. Emily's mother-in-law, Emily herself, maybe even my own mother. They had all quietly agreed that I didn't belong. I wasn't family. I was an afterthought. And something inside me, something that had been quiet and polite for years, snapped. I stood there for a second, letting the sting settle into something colder. Not anger exactly, not sadness either, just clarity. These people, my own family included, had decided I wasn't worth a seat at the table. Fine. They forgot something important, though. I grew up with Emily. I knew her secrets. I knew exactly how she really felt about her new in-laws behind those fake smiles. I knew about the nights she called me half drunk, ranting about how much she hated them, how she was just playing nice until the ink dried on the marriage license. And if Emily thought she could humiliate me today and still waltz off into her picture-perfect life unscathed, she had another thing coming. I took a deep breath, feeling something dangerous settle inside me. Not rage, but something sharper. Precision. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to throw a fit. No, that would give them what they wanted. Proof that I was the problem child, the bitter one. Instead, I was going to do what Emily hated most. I was going to be calm, calculated, ruthless. I glanced around. The bridal suite was still buzzing. Mom fussed over Emily's veil. Bridesmaids giggled over something on their phones. Emily's new mother-in-law was chatting with another guest, still shooting occasional smug glances my way. Perfect. I straightened my jacket, tucked my place card a little deeper into my pocket, and fixed a polite smile onto my face. Game on. I drifted closer to Emily's mother-in-law, who was sipping champagne and pretending not to gloat. "You know," I said casually, "it's funny. Emily was so stressed about the seating arrangements." The woman perked up immediately, sensing gossip. "Really?" she said, feigning mild interest. "Oh, yeah," I nodded, dropping my voice conspiratorially. She was terrified. Certain people might ruin the wedding photos. I let the sentence hang in the air, watching realization flicker across her face. Emily, across the room, stiffened visibly. I caught her eye and gave her the most innocent smile I could manage. Emily's mother-in-law leaned in a little, curiosity flashing in her perfectly made-up face. Who exactly did she mean? I gave a tiny, non-committal shrug. "You know how brides get," I said lightly. "Worried about dresses being too flashy. Guests stealing attention, that sort of thing." Emily was now practically vibrating where she stood, glaring daggers at me. I turned away before she could come storming over. Let her stew. This was just the opening act, and I hadn't even gotten to the really juicy parts yet. I waited for my moment. The bridal suite was still buzzing. Guests were starting to filter toward the ceremony, and the energy was that perfect, chaotic kind that made people careless. Emily was busy fake laughing with a group of bridesmaids when I I casually drifted toward Emily's mother-in-law again, who now watched me with a little more interest, like she couldn't quite figure out if I was friend or foe. Perfect. I leaned in slightly, keeping my voice just low enough to seem like a secret. You know, I said, Emily was actually pretty stressed about the speeches too. Her eyebrows lifted, intrigued. Oh, I nodded solemnly. Yeah. She was worried certain people might make the day about themselves, you know, try to steal the spotlight, embarrass her somehow. I didn't name names. I didn't have to. I let the words dangle, giving her just enough rope to wonder. Emily, who had clearly been eavesdropping from a few feet away, stiffened so hard I thought she might snap in half. The mother-in-law gave a tight little laugh. Well, some people do love attention. I smiled politely, but said nothing. I could practically feel Emily's panic growing. I turned slightly toward the bridesmaids, catching a few glances. People were noticing the tension now. Good. I didn't want a scene yet. I wanted a slow simmer. Just enough discomfort to make Emily sweat. She abandoned her group and stormed over to me, her heels clicking sharply against the tile. Can I talk to you for a second? She hissed, grabbing my arm with a little too much force. I peeled her hand off me like she was something sticky. Sure, sis, I said brightly. Always happy to catch up with immediate family. Her face darkened. She pulled me a few steps away, still in full view of several curious guests. What the hell are you doing? She snapped under her breath. Having a lovely conversation, I replied innocently. You know me, always the life of the party. Emily's hands were clenched at her sides. You're trying to ruin my wedding, she hissed. I tilted my head, feigning confusion. Me? No. I'm just trying to enjoy my assigned seat by the coats. Her eyes flashed with anger. I leaned in slightly, dropping the friendly facade. You wanted to treat me like an outsider, I said softly. Fine. But don't act surprised when I stop playing by the family rules. I stepped back, smiling like we were sharing a hilarious inside joke. Around us, whispers were picking up. A few bridesmaids exchanged glances. Even the wedding planner looked nervous, like she could feel the shift in the room. Emily realized too late that she'd made a mistake. By trying to shut me up, she'd only made people curious. And I wasn't even close to finished. Emily stood there, seething. Her fists clenched so tightly her knuckles turned white. I could see the calculations racing behind her eyes, trying to figure out how to shut this down without drawing even more attention. But it was too late. The bridesmaids were whispering. The wedding planner was frozen by the door, unsure whether to intervene or call security. And Mom was glancing over nervously from across the room, sensing the tension but too wrapped up in her fantasy of the perfect wedding to act. I smiled, a slow, deliberate smile, and then I turned back to Emily's mother-in-law, who was watching us with thinly veiled curiosity. You know, I said, loud enough for the surrounding guests to hear. It's funny. Emily was actually terrified about today. She kept saying she didn't want certain people too close to the head table. Didn't want the wedding photos ruined. I let the words hang in the air, savoring the ripple of murmurs that followed. Emily's face drained of color. Her mother-in-law stiffened. Ruined? She echoed, her voice dangerously sweet. I nodded solemnly, like I was sharing a grave secret. Yeah. Something about tacky dresses and attention seekers? I shrugged. You know how brides get. Emily stumbled forward, practically tripping over the hem of her dress. He's lying, she gasped out, her voice too high, too shrill. I raised an eyebrow. Oh? Then maybe you'd like to explain what you said about the speeches. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I turned back to the crowd, playing it up. You know, Emily was really stressed that someone, and I'm not naming names, might try to make the day about themselves with some cringy, emotional mess of a speech. A few bridesmaids stifled laughter. One of them whispered something to the girl next to her, who outright giggled. Emily's face turned scarlet. "Alex, stop," she hissed. I ignored her. I wasn't done yet. "And then there was the bachelorette party," I added casually as if discussing the weather. A collective gasp went through the group. Emily whirled on me, eyes wide with panic. "Alex, shut up." I smiled wider. "Oh, don't be shy, Em, remember? You spent half the night ranting about how you couldn't wait to be done pretending, how you were only tolerating certain people for the sake of appearances." The mother-in-law's expression hardened like concrete. "Is that true, Emily?" she asked, voice sharp enough to cut glass. Emily looked around wildly, searching for an escape, a denial that would stick. But the room was too quiet now. Too many eyes were on her. Too many ears had heard. I didn't mean it like that," she stammered, her voice breaking. "Oh, sure," I said, laughing softly. "It was taken out of context, right? Classic." Emily's fiancé, the groom, finally appeared in the doorway, drawn by the commotion. "What's going on?" he asked, confused. His mother turned on him instantly. "Your fiancé has been talking trash about our family for months." His face paled. "Emily, is that true?" Emily looked like she might faint. "No, I mean, not like that. He's twisting everything." The groom's face hardened. "Did you or didn't you say those things?" She opened her mouth and then closed it again. The silence was answer enough. Around us, the guests started murmuring louder. Some were clearly eating this up like primetime television. Even Mom, who usually would have jumped in to defend Emily no matter what, looked horrified. She reached for Emily's arm. "Honey, just apologize. We can fix this." But Emily was beyond fixing now. Her big day, the day she had imagined being all about her, was crumbling around her feet, and there wasn't a thing she could do to stop it. I took a step back, surveying the wreckage, and for the first time that day I genuinely smiled. Not a forced, polite smile, a real one. Because for once, Emily wasn't the star. She wasn't the golden child, the main character, the center of the universe. She was just exposed. And damn, it felt good. The silence after the explosion was deafening. For a few heartbeats, no one moved. No one spoke. It was as if the entire bridal suite had been frozen in place, trapped between disbelief and secondhand embarrassment. Then the yelling started. Emily's mother-in-law was the first to break. She launched into a tirade so sharp it could have cut diamonds, her voice slicing through the heavy air. "You ungrateful little brat," she shouted, pointing an accusatory finger at Emily. "After everything my family has done for you, the money we spent, the effort we put in, and this is how you repay us?" Emily stammered, looking around wildly for support, but finding none. Mom tried to jump in, her voice high and desperate. "Please, let's not ruin the day. It's just a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" the mother-in-law snapped. "Your daughter has been talking about us behind our backs for months. How exactly do you misunderstand that?" The groom looked like he wanted the ground to open up and swallow him whole. "Emily," he said tightly, "you need to tell me the truth, right now." Emily opened her mouth, maybe to deny, maybe to spin, but the room wasn't interested in excuses anymore. The damage was done. I stood off to the side, arms crossed, sipping a glass of champagne someone had abandoned on a table. Watching, observing, letting it all fall apart without lifting a finger. Across the room, bridesmaids were whispering to each other, barely hiding their laughter. Some guests were openly recording on their phones, no doubt already planning which group chat they'd blast the videos into later. A few older relatives looked mortified, others looked downright entertained. It was, in short, a complete and total disaster, and for once, it had nothing to do with me. Emily tried to rally, tears welling up in her eyes, her voice cracking. "I didn't mean it. I was stressed. Everyone says stupid things when they're stressed." Her fiancé didn't look moved. He turned and walked out of the room without another word. Emily made a strangled noise, like she wanted to call him back, but didn't dare. Mom rushed to her side, trying to comfort her, whispering frantic, useless things. Dad just stood there, shell-shocked, rubbing his temples like he was deeply regretting every life choice that had led him to this exact moment. The mother-in-law wasn't done. "Your daughter is a liar," she said coldly to my parents, "and you enabled her. I don't want her anywhere near my family after today." With that, she spun on her heel and marched out, her entourage trailing behind her like angry storm clouds. The whispers grew louder, bolder. Someone snorted audibly. Emily crumpled into a chair, shaking, mascara running down her cheeks, her dream day officially in ruins. I set my champagne down gently on a nearby table and straightened my jacket. It was time for me to leave. No need to stick around for the ashes. I walked past the stunned guests, past the wilted flowers, past the once pristine decorations, now marred by the tension hanging heavy in the air. At the doorway, I paused, glanced back at the wreckage one last time. Emily caught my eye, her face twisted in rage and misery. I gave her a small, polite wave, and then I walked out, calm, steady, satisfied. For once, I wasn't the one left standing alone in the hallway. I didn't rush. I walked slowly, weaving through the stunned guests and half-finished conversations, the weight of everything that had just happened hanging in the air like smoke after a fire. When I reached the gift table, I paused. There it was. My gift. A beautiful box, carefully wrapped, picked out after weeks of trying to find something perfect. For a sister who had made it perfectly clear I didn't matter, I tilted my head for a second, just thinking. Then, with zero hesitation, I picked it up. A few people noticed. I could feel their stares, hear the small gasps. I didn't care. I tucked the box neatly under my arm and turned toward the exit, calm and collected. "Alex!" Emily's voice cracked across the room. I kept walking. She caught up to me near the doorway, her face blotchy with smeared makeup, her dress askew, looking nothing like the radiant bride she had dreamed of being. "Are you seriously taking your gift back?" she cried, loud enough for the remaining guests to hear. I stopped and turned just enough to look at her. My voice was quiet, but it carried. "Well," I said, "since I'm not real family anymore, I figured I shouldn't burden you with it." The look on her face, somewhere between fury and humiliation, was almost art. Mom made a noise like she wanted to say something, but Dad subtly shook his head, as if silently begging her not to make it worse. I smiled, a small, polite, almost pitying smile. "Good luck, Emily," I said. "You're going to need it." And then I pushed open the doors and stepped into the cool night. The air outside felt sharp and clean, washing the heavy, toxic air of that room off my skin. I stood there for a moment, just breathing it in, letting the chaos and noise fade behind me. Then I adjusted the gift under my arm and walked away. No anger, no regrets, no looking back. The next morning, my phone buzzed like it had a death wish. Calls, texts, voicemails. A full assault from the people who, 24 hours ago, barely acknowledged my existence. Funny how that worked. I scrolled through the chaos with mild amusement, sipping my coffee like I had all the time in the world. 12 missed calls from Mom, 4 voicemails from Emily, even 2 missed calls from my dad, which honestly shocked me more than anything. I started with Mom's voicemails. The first one was sobbing. "Alex, please call me. We can fix this. Please don't destroy the family over one bad night." The second voicemail, pure fury. "How dare you humiliate your sister after everything we've done for you?" The third was even better, a wild mix of pleading and scolding in the same breath. "You've ruined everything. I hope you're proud. But call me back. We can still fix this, maybe." I didn't call her back. Then came Emily's texts. They started angry. "You destroyed the happiest day of my life. You're a monster." Then veered into guilt-tripping. "I loved you. How could you do this to me?" And finally ended with classic Emily melodrama. I wish you were never part of this family. For someone who spent years treating me like background noise, she sure had a lot to say now. I let the messages pile up without responding. I wasn't interested in playing their game anymore. Then my phone buzzed again. A simple text from Dad. Call me if you want. No pressure. No yelling, no accusations, just Dad. Against my better judgment, I called him. He picked up after 2 rings, like he had been waiting. Hey, he said, voice rougher than usual. Hey, I replied. We sat in silence for a few beats, finally sighed. You okay? I blinked. I wasn't expecting that. Yeah, I said after a second. Better than expected. He gave a low chuckle, the kind that didn't quite reach laughter. Well, you sure blew it all up. Guess so, I said lightly. Another pause. Why now? He asked. I leaned back in my chair, watching the morning light filter through the window. Because they pushed me too far, I said simply. Because pretending didn't make it hurt any less. He sighed again, not angry this time, just sad. You weren't wrong, he said finally. I sat up straighter. What? You weren't wrong, he repeated. About Emily. About your mother. About the way they treat you. I didn't know what to say. After all these years, hearing even one parent admit it out loud was jarring. I should have said something sooner, Dad added quietly. I should have had your back more. I swallowed hard, caught off guard by how much that simple sentence meant. Thanks, Dad, I said, voice rougher than I wanted it to be. He cleared his throat. Your mom's still trying to patch things up, he said after a moment. Blaming you for everything. I snorted. Sounds about right. And Emily? I asked. He hesitated. Emily's a wreck. The groom's family is furious. They are talking about postponing the honeymoon. Baby, canceling more than that? I leaned back, letting the news settle. Not out of glee, not out of triumph, just closure. It was never going to last, I said simply. Dad let out a breath. Probably not, he agreed. Another beat of silence stretched between us, but this time it didn't feel heavy. It felt honest. Take care of yourself, Alex, Dad said finally. Don't wait for us to catch up. Live your life. Something warm and sharp twisted in my chest. We hung up, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was losing anything. I was gaining something. Myself. It's been a few weeks now since the wedding. I haven't spoken to Emily. I haven't spoken to Mom either, not that she hasn't tried, alternating between guilt trips and silent treatments depending on the day. Dad reaches out occasionally, just to check in. No pressure, no expectations. It's strange how quiet my life feels now. Strange, but not bad. For the first time in years, I don't feel like I'm carrying the weight of someone else's expectations around my neck. I don't feel invisible. I don't feel like the backup sibling. I don't feel like a coat rack someone props up at family functions just to complete the aesthetic. I feel free. Emily, from what I hear, is still furious, still convinced that I ruined her wedding, still unable to understand that I didn't destroy anything she hadn't already hollowed out herself. Maybe her marriage will survive. Maybe it won't. Either way, it's not my problem anymore. And honestly, I don't regret what I did. Not even a little bit. Sometimes standing up for yourself doesn't look like a big speech or a perfect moment of closure. Sometimes it just looks like quietly refusing to sit at the coat rack and pretend you're grateful for the honor. So, was I too petty? Should I have smiled, swallowed it, and played nice one more time? Or did my sister and the rest of them finally get exactly what they deserved? I'd love to hear what you think. Thanks for sticking around to hear my side of the story. Sometimes, standing up for yourself means you have to be willing to be seen as the bad guy. It means choosing self-respect over silent acceptance. It means realizing that not every apology is yours to give. For years, I believed that keeping the peace was more important than defending my place at the table. that if I stayed quiet, swallowed the hurt, and smiled through the disrespect, eventually they would see me. They didn't. And maybe they never will. But that's okay, because I finally see myself. I'm not just the background character in someone else's story. I'm not the afterthought, the spare seat, the, "oh, you're here too" guest. I'm someone who deserves better. Sometimes choosing yourself means losing people who only loved you when it was convenient. And as painful as that sounds, it's also a kind of freedom. If you're ever in a room where you're made to feel invisible, remember this: you have every right to walk out. You don't owe anyone your silence just to make them more comfortable. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is leave.